Sometimes I get jealous of not getting to engage in some of the grander follies of Lumen.
What you all did was one of the most painful moments in the history of this company.
Devon's arc this season is basically confirms that she's one of a kind, and I want to ask you what it's like for you to play such a grounded character in a show full of abstract concepts and larger-than-life characters.
It's wonderful, and it's a joy to be able to inhabit that role, which is sometimes to sort of ground those moments that can feel grand and spectacular, but also it's sort of a tall order because it can be a little isolating. Sometimes I get jealous of not getting to engage in some of the grander follies of Lumen, but it feels special and it feels like an honor. I feel like getting to play the more soulful moments but in this family dynamic are special.
More often than not, Devon says, does, or thinks exactly what the viewer would say or do in her situation. Is it fair to describe her as the voice of reason in Severance?
You know, it's funny in this season, especially because we get to see a bit more of her interior world. She's not always on it. You know, I think she likes to think she would be, but once we see her plan on its feet, she's not always nailing it. You know, she pisses off Ragabi, who then leaves. She says the wrong thing to Mark in episode 10, which obviously spooks him and leads him to realize that he would, in essence, die if their plan continued. So I think she's acting on pure impulse for most of this season. And because of that, is not always thinking clearly. You know, it was fun to be able to play her as someone who, yes, is grounded and yes, I think has a strong head on her shoulders, but who also is just a fallible human who's doing her best. And sometimes desperation means we make sloppy decisions, and that certainly happens to her a couple times this season.
Moving on to the season finale, how would you describe Devon's mindset in the season 2 finale? Along with Miss Cobell, she basically orchestrates the plan to rescue Gemma, and while she's doing all of that, she has her own responsibilities at home with her newborn. Why do you think she goes to such an extent?
I appreciate you mentioning that because I think some people forget about that part because it is sort of a secondary storyline. But to me, that was such a huge part of where she lands energetically in this moment. She's exhausted. I mean, that baby is not that old, you know, she's still breastfeeding and she's having a moment of tension with her husband. Her marriage is at odds. And I think because of that, biologically, she's showing up to these moments with impatience and desperation, and that informs some of these more slapdash decisions that she makes. So it felt important to me to sort of honor her in that sense and remind myself that her body is exhausted also. You know, this is a woman who is providing literal sustenance to another human being right now who she's had to leave at home in order to try to save someone else's life. So I think that element for her chemically is intense in and of itself.
Read somewhere that you've said that out of all the characters you've played, Devon is the most similar to you personally. And with that in mind, I wanted to ask you about her relationship with Rickon. What would you say was the thing that connected them emotionally and made them fall in love?
I think it's important to remember that, like any relationship, we're meeting them at a particular moment in their marriage. You know, I think they shared many years of levity and love and laughter together before Lumen came stomping in. So I think that there probably was an ease between them that we're not necessarily seeing in the wake of Gemma's death. I think that created a fissure in their family dynamic with Mark, Gemma, Devon, and Rickon. And because of that, I think they've each sort of retreated to a more insecure version of themselves. I think Devon is focused on desperately trying to get to the bottom of the Lumen mystery. Rickon is focused on furthering his literary career and is sort of tethered to his own ego. But I do think that there is real love between them. Rickon is verbose and he can be ridiculous and over the top, but I also think he's pretty upfront about who he is. Though he talks a big game, he actually doesn't bullshit. And I think that beneath all of his grandiosity, his heart is really warm. And he really loves Devon and lets her be herself. So I think when she chose to be with this person, she'd probably dated all sorts of different people and had her wild splashy time in her 20s and 30s and backpacked everywhere. And I think when she chose Rickon, she was ready to say, I want a family, I want stasis, I want stability. And this person will allow me that avenue. So I think, like any tragedy, that shakes them up in a way she hadn't anticipated. So maybe she's starting to see some of his weaknesses and her own more than she had planned.